Good evening. My name is Matt Bell. I'm the director of the ASU World Building Initiative. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the first workshop of the fall semester, which is Cones and Caution, the Precarity of Signaling the Future. Tonight, as in all our workshops, we'll have presentations from members of our ASU community. After, we'll have time for conversation and for questions from the audience. If you're in the room, obviously, please prepare your questions. But if you're online, we'll also take questions from the chat when the time comes. So please be ready as well. Just before we begin, I just want to thank our partners at ASU, including the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, the Department of English, the Virginia G. Piper Center for Creative Writing, and the Humanities Institute. Before I introduce our worlders tonight, I just want to say that me and Ron and Erika did a version of this talk at a conference, the Society for Literature, Science, and the Arts in Oregon this month, and it was a lot of fun. And one of the reasons that I was excited about this topic when we did it there as well is that I've spent a lot of time in fiction thinking about future communications or what gets passed on or what gets lost over time. Hi, come on in, sir. And I think it's really fun to think about how language and symbols and ideas sort of get morphed by time, what gets lost and what gets carried forward, what we interpret correctly or badly from other times. And I think this is a really interesting talk for both these speakers about how they have navigated communication to other humans, to the future, from the past, and also from the non-human sort of entities we share the world with. And I think it's a fun conversation to have. So excited to hear your ideas after theirs. Tonight's world builders are going to be Erika Lynne Hansen, who is an interdisciplinary artist, researcher, and educator whose work is rooted in textile practices. Her projects range from video installations to participatory public workshops that actively engage with various sites and their inhabitants. Currently associate professor of textiles / socially engaged practices. I think that's such a good remit. Those two things together are so good. At Arizona State University, Hansen received her MFA from California College of the Arts and a BFA in fiber from the Kansas City Art Institute. Her work has been exhibited at spaces that range from Forum Plus Concept in Santa Fe to Fields Projects in New York City to the Tucson Museum of Art. Additionally, Hansen has participated in residency programs across the U.S. and Scandinavia with particular attention to rural locations that support the ongoing dialogue regarding post-human ecologies within her practice. Ron Broglio writes books and essays on non-human phenomenology, post-rational knowing, and animal studies. He curates and produces environmental art and experiences. Broglio is director of the Humanities Institute here at Arizona State University and field marshal of the Animal Revolution. Please put our hands together for our speakers, and Erika will be up first.
I'm Erika. This is my talk. It's called Geolinguistics or Observations in Volcano and Human Dialogue. So what am I going to try and do here in 15 minutes? What am I trying to talk to you about in 15 minutes? I'm going to try and use Volcanoes National Park as a site to examine two different geotemporalities and how they sort of are in conversation that is set up by humans, but not about humans, but is also read by humans. So as a disclaimer, I am not an expert in any of the following. I'm not a geologist, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a humanist, I'm not a philosopher, I'm not an expert in Hawaii volcanoes or anything else I'm covering here really. Though I am an artist and a weaver and a connection maker, and I'm interested in entanglements and adjacencies. What I'm presenting are moments and observations I'm thinking through, and hopefully they will prompt you to notice things differently as you move through the world. So for the past 10 years, I've been examining sites of human geologic relations and how they're entangled with questions of ownership, governmental bureaucracies, capital economies, recreation, something that's kind of like the spiritual. And one thing I have been thinking around is geologic agency, or whether that's a problematic concept, or since the geologic just really operates beyond human frameworks like agency. So this presentation examines how volcano time intersects with on-demand nature of contemporary Western time. In 2024, I was artist in residence at Volcanoes National Park. To narrow the focus and temporal scale, I used publicly accessible data to build a narrative around a specific moment in Kilauea's life and the lives of the humans and non-humans who share its ecosystem. So infrastructural safety aids, such as cones, signs, barriers, serve as visual leitmotifs, ever-present sign of the evolving relationship between the human movement at the site and the volcano's movement. So the time I spent at the site of the volcano was one of dormancy, which is really interesting for a site that has been erupting quite often, and it has erupted multiple times since I left. So before I start talking about volcanoes, I'm just going to sprinkle in a little bit of information or a little like bits of things that I've been thinking with. Like I said, not an expert, but someone who's sort of connecting dots and trying to understand like modes for thinking through the world. So the first thing I want to offer is the final paragraph from Ursula Le Guin's short stories, the author of The Acacia Seeds and Other Extracts. It's a short story where we're working through the journals of humans that are working through reading animal language and understanding sort of like the different modalities of them. But at the end, she has this little nugget that I love in terms of someone who's thinking through the geologic. So after she posits the idea of understanding therolinguistics, then we move to plant linguistics, I think it's phytolinguistics, and then we move to geolinguistics. So this quote that says, and with them, or after them, may there not come an even bolder adventure, the first geolinguist, who, ignoring the delicate, transient lyrics of the lichen, will read beneath the still less communicative, more passive, wholly atemporal, cold volcanic poetry of the rocks. Each one a word spoken how long ago by the earth itself, and the immense solitude, the immenser community of space. So there's that note. So another note is on language. So I use the terms rock, stone, and geomateriality intermixed. So here are just rough definitions, so you have them. So when I'm using the word rock, I'm generally thinking about rock as a base word for a conglomeration of materials, stone as an object that has been cleaved from a rock by a human or another force. Thinking about minerals as independent elements that come together to make up rock or stone. And then geomaterials as a blanket term for using, or come on in. A blanket term to use that is like any sort of geomaterial that includes disturbed things. So think about like concrete, I don't know, anything that is extracted from the ground and then where it's transformed by humans and we use it in such a way. So a couple more ideas of inertness, attunement, and temporal recalibration, active rocks versus passive rocks. So this is a note on the idea of inertness that I've been thinking with. So here's just the definition that was put forward. So of matter or material things having no inherent power of action, motion, or resistance, inactive, inanimate, having property of inertia without active chemical, physiological, or other properties. And thinking about inert waste. So waste that is neither chemically nor biologically reactive, will not decompose or only very slowly. So examples including sand, concrete, demolition waste. And I've been thinking about this in terms of like cost and the price we put on things, whereas like biodegradable waste costs more to get rid of as opposed to inert waste. Same with hazardous waste, costs even more. So thinking about the fact that inert waste sites are almost all geomaterials. And then again, like how are we valuing the geologic? Okay, and then a note on attunements. So geologists are professionally calibrated to lithic time. Geomaterials we encounter every day they entangle us with lithic time. Think about roads, bridges, concrete, petroleum, decorative landscape rock, mountains in a national park, a privately owned mountain, sand on a beach, and then the sand that's used to make glass, and then the sand that's used to make semiconductors, and then the security that surrounds the compound where the sand is mined to make the cauldrons for the semiconductors. And then there's also the nodules in like the North Atlantic Sea. They're like the magic nodules that have everything we're trying to extract to make clean energy. So it's like paying attention to these geomaterials. And if you're interested in that, I highly recommend Ed Conway's Material World book, The 6 Raw Materials That Shape Civilization. It goes deep in all of these things. And then I just want to give a brief instance of geocollaboration before we start talking about volcanoes. So organic, biologic, anthropogenic minerals, evolution. So I'm going to read this part, and then when I'm done reading this part, I'm going to read less and then talk more about volcanoes. Okay, so I'm reading this part. So additionally, I'm thinking about instances of geocollaboration and and transformation between humans, microbes, plants, and the other animals to suit our needs. So thinking about the way that humans build concrete architecture about and for humans, or crustose lichens live on stone and slowly munch away at it. So is there a definition that separates the idea of collaboration with these materials or transformation of the materials, or is it kind of impossible to think about that definition? So I want to take, for example, anthropogenic minerals. So anthropogenic minerals are multi-species creations that have come into being due to human geologic adjacencies. So these new mineral compounds show up inside the holding tanks for nuclear reactors, or when bird poop collects over open coal fire sites, they create new and novel mineral species. This new mineral categories entered into the public discourse in 2017 by a paper written by Robert Hansen called On Mineralogy of the Anthropocene Epoch. So for me, coming across this paper had two lasting effects. The first of which was not the point of the paper, but again, not a geologist, don't know about rocks, thought I did. So the first thing was that the paper lays out the fact that minerals on this planet have been evolving alongside organic and biologic life. So the Earth started with roughly 55 minerals and now has over 5,000 on record. The new information this paper addressed was that 208 of these mineral species have been identified at sites that are directly due to human intervention, not on purpose, but due to proximity. So at like a mine site, there will be new mineral species growing on the timber there, or the minerals that are growing inside of a nuclear tank. They like drain the reactor and all of a sudden there's new minerals that are there. So not things that we actively tried to grow, but happened due to things we did. Okay, so for me, coming across this paper, wrong thing, sorry. So the second important point that stood out to me was the fact that we're living through this phase of multi-species extinction, but the geologic record is expanding. So thinking about that as another point in it. So just an example of other people thinking through human georelations is Catherine Youssef and Maya Hird's essay, Lines of Shite, where they use the same paper on mineralogy of the Anthropocene epoch to effectively trace the geologic organic entanglement. So they bring it back to bacteria as sort of like a crux element, and the microbes' relationship to geoevolution. So they go on to propose that bacteria set off geologic evolution and the chain of events that led to humans, including our waste, our politics, and our technology, and the general mess we're in today. Essentially, they are talking about bacteria's relationship to water, water's relationship to the tectonic plates moving, the shifting of the plates, then leading to organic life, leading to us. Okay. Volcanoes. Do you guys know who knows how volcanoes are made? Yes, some, little bit. Okay. Again, not a volcano expert, but base volcanic information. Hotspots in the core of the Earth, where the formation of magma is coming up. So the Hawaiian Islands specifically are formed by this like fixed hotspot that is happening underneath the tectonic plates. The tectonic plates are slowly shifting, and lava magma is rising to the surface and creating new islands, and then also at Kilauea being a really active site. So one of the reasons why I'm really interested in volcanoes, specifically in the larger work that I'm doing that's talking about entangled geo stuffs, is that volcanoes betray the reputation of rock being old. So when you're like at the park, one of the park rangers' things they do is they're giving the tour, and there's kids on the tour. And I love the little exchange that I watched a number of times where they would be like, how old are you? Okay, you're 5. See that rock over there? You're older than that volcano. So like changing that perspective from a child's point of view, and ours. So Kilauea is an incredibly active and young volcano. So it was constantly erupting from 1983 to 2018, kind of just slowly oozing. So thinking about like the slow ooze of a supervolcano, also lava being a very present thing. So in 2018, there was a really large eruption that stopped this continuous eruption. This video here shows the caldera of the volcano, and through sort of this massive eruption that happened in 2018, it changed the border of the outline of the volcano and also collapsed a lot of the walls. Part of what happened in that collapse was there was a road that went around the entire perimeter of the volcano, and part of that fell in. So that eruption was bad. It could have been worse. USGS was monitoring it. And yeah, okay, so I'm gonna jump to talk about inactivity. So I was in residence there from the July 29th to August 11th, 2004, and there was no active lava. So thinking about the anticipation of going to a site where there's always active lava and then it not being there was an interesting thing to try and understand and like situate in terms of like how do you understand a place. So I was an artist resident at Volcanoes National Park. And one of the things that really struck me while I was there, I've done a lot of work around national parks, is like what parks are formed around. And I was reading this book on infrastructure, and Deb Chatra, the author, uses the term charismatic mega structures to like align with the term like charismatic megafauna to like get us to care about animals. And she uses the term charismatic mega structures to get us to like the Golden Gate Bridge to get us to care about infrastructures. And then I like the idea of like, what are the other charismatic megas we can think about? So like, is Kilauea a charismatic mega volcano? Yes, it 100% is. Same with like charismatic mega arches that form Arches National Park and so on. So here are some other things that were being active. A rainbow in a caldera. Oops. The steam vents that were happening. So again, active volcano site. So even if lava isn't actually erupting, things are happening. So there are sulfur vents all over. So this is really like sensorial place in terms of like heat, moisture, smell. And there's a little bit that makes it feel really bodily in that way. Here's an image of steam vents. There were also earthquakes happening the whole time that I was there. So thinking about the way that the infrastructure that's there pulls the traces of activity that we wouldn't necessarily pay attention to. So here is cracks from earthquakes that were happening, and how the asphalt is this record of this like thing that you maybe would feel but maybe not see in the landscape necessarily. So Kilauea is the best monitored volcano on Earth. The USGS there is really cool. Everyone's really nice. If I could go back, I would love to work there. That's not my field. But I was watching the earthquake tracking that they would do live updates every day. It was really interesting to see about like different modes of sensing. So thinking about the asphalt as a sensing mechanism, and then the USGS as sensing. So here are satellite maps that show where the ground was like swelling and moving, and like they were trying to predict where the next eruption would happen. So like this shows where like the ground is inflating. So I don't know, we don't often think of the ground as inflating. So what are these different ways that help us think about the ground and the earth as this like live, active, moving being? I also like in their information, they give interpretations, and they give possibilities of what to expect. So also in a world where we're like, this is the truth, this is what happens, this is the future, it's nice to see here are possible outcomes, like inhabiting the gray area a little bit more, like understanding that we live in a flexible space. Okay, a little bit about infrastructure. So asphalt is really cool. So asphalt is 5% asphalt and then 95% aggregate, making asphalt like a thing that's very of a place, because you're not going to spend a bunch of money to haul in aggregate. So on the Hawaiian Islands, the aggregate they use is basalt. And basalt is volcanic rock. So thinking about that relationship between the asphalt that's cracking actually being a past version of its recording itself, if that makes sense. This is just a note on national parks. The national parks are places, they're like about the natural wonder to see, but they're also a place for roads. When you enter a national park, you're most likely going to be driving it as opposed to hiking it. That's the way most viewers experience it. They are a product of the 20th century and car culture. And almost all parks have webcams. And this is Arches National Park, where the webcam shows you the traffic to get in. So here are just some images that I took of thinking about where the asphalt is becoming the vehicle for recording. So this is a stretch of the road that was right before it fell into the volcano in 2018. But here's like the physical markings of that earthquake activity and how it's like growing in with the land, but also showing signs of past events. Here are humans trying to mark some of that conversation that's happening between asphalt, volcanic material, and the current active state of the volcano. More preventative signs. More preventative signs. We've got cone. There's earthquake damage. Notification of a bump. And also, like, if you notice, these roads are really new. So it's like this like asphalt that's just been laid down that almost feels like tracing paper or something that you've laid down at a site and it's taking this imprint and then it's moving forward. A cone and like a very clear line of earth moving, shifting. And here's some more permanent markers that they used. Here's a like permanent stanchion that's like, look at that good break. Pay attention to that. And the ferns are growing in there. It's more hazard signs. So essentially what I'm trying to think about with this is using the road and the volcano as proxies, using the road as a stand-in for human-built infrastructure and the volcano as proxy for the unbuilt, thinking about how they're also collaborators or in a geologic conversation that's taking place without humans, even though we're slightly in that mix. Just a quick, tiny epilogue in that I didn't see a volcano erupt, but it's erupted since then, in terms of surveillance. So I've decided that sublime action can only happen on screen. So if you can slow watch volcanoes steam any hours of the day. So in terms of volcano monitoring, it exists in sort of 3 digital speeds. There's social media speed. So if you follow Hawaii volcanoes on their social media, they've got like great reels and TikToks, like quick. So thinking about like how can you understand the geologic at social media speed, bite-sized clips. And then there's traditional media speed that they put out there in terms of like documentary style coverage, 30-minute things. And then there's live stream speed, which is actually at volcanic speed, so you're watching it in real time. But instead of like tremors and like actual feeling of the volcano, you feel like the temporality of your computer screen, which is also geologic. Here's some sensational eruption videos that have happened in the last year. We're on like episode 32. It's not erupting today. But if you go to the park, you can watch this happening. And that's a really big fountain. Okay, that's my talk. Wrong button.
That'll work. Yeah. It's only a couple slides. Okay.
Great. Thanks. So, after the apocalypse, when humans are scant or have disappeared from this earth altogether, the cones will remain. They'll be in wayward sites left for purposes unknown and long since defunct. They will be sending orange signals with no one to receive their message. But you don't have to wait until doomsday. There are faithful cones all around us that give a premonition of this earthly world to come. One is knocked over and kicked to the curb. Another is in a ditch. One is bent awkwardly as if deflated. Others stand vigilantly, vertical, and continue to give off bright, shiny orange glow. But there's nothing around them, no obstacles, No objects, no fellow cones. They remain purposeless while seeming so purposeful. Feral cones is about feral cones is about human language systems and when these systems go awry. So you see an orange cone and you know what it means. Be aware, something's happening. These guardians of safety are part of our cultural language system. However, when stuck in a tree, abandoned in an empty parking lot, or languishing in an overgrown meadow, these cones, languishing in an overgrown meadow, a cone is out of place and tells us that our language system has faltered. These are road cones. If these road cones signal anything, they portend purpose and meaning gone sideways, feral, nomadic. Our language systems have failed us. Our cultural signs are crumbling. They are mirrors to our own waywardness, a sign of existential dilemma, an icon of loneliness, a dutifulness beyond any duty. They are more than we ever intended. So, as my girlfriend Suzette wonderfully did, is she created this speculative future. It was like imagining someone from hundreds of years from now coming across cones and imagining what were humans thinking when they created these things, right? And that exercise of kind of speculative futures allows us to defamiliarize our objects around us. And I think, if we think about what Erika's doing, what I'm trying to do here, is that we have a lot of transparent sign systems that we simply obey, we walk through, stop lights, stop signs. We have all these sign systems that tell us how to behave culturally and what happens when those sign systems go awry. And then in this case, as we've all seen cones that have gone astray. And the idea is that they both occupy space now, but they are also windows onto a future. We know there will be a future when there are petrochemical orange cones and no humans. And you don't have to wait for hundreds of years from now to see what that future is like. I've just shown you pictures from the future. Okay? And so in that case, what it means is there are around us these portals of temporality, which is also something that Erika is playing with the geologic, that we occupy not just one time space, but multiple different temporalities. And the clue is to turn the mind to this way of seeing. You could look at, Eugene Thacker has a book, In the Dust of This Planet, and just read the first chapter of In the Dust of This Planet, and it's about how to access temporal portals to the lithic, to the earth beyond humans. When I do this talk, I've now done it twice, I always find a cone. I don't bring one with me. I just find one at wherever site we're at. And if you walk around this campus, you're familiar that there's a lot of construction. You can pretty much walk anywhere on campus and run into cones. And it's great because the apocalypse is everywhere here. You can witness the apocalypse throughout campus. And my homework assignment for you tonight would be that after the event or in the next few days, go and find your own cone. And send Matt and I pictures of that cone. Just look up our email address, send me random pictures. You don't have to say anything. You can give it a story. You can tell me about a future cone. You can tell me about a waywardness. Or you can just send me a cone. And the signal is received, the signal of waywardness. There's a Walter Benjamin quote that I quite like from his thesis on philosophy of history. It says, the angel, he's talking about the angel of history. He says, the angel would like to stay and awaken the dead and make whole what's been smashed by history, by time. But a storm is blowing from paradise. It is caught in his wings with such a violence that the angel can no longer close them. The storm irresistibly propels him into the future, to which his back is turned, while the pile of debris before him grows skyward. This storm, pushing him ever forward, is called progress. So, the angel of history beholding progress. Right. From Eugene Thacker, this world for us is not, of course, totally within the ambient of human wants and desires. The world often bites back, resists, or ignores our attempt to mold it into the world for us. Let us call this the world in itself. And so there are the cones residing in the world in itself.
Erika, when I grab these seats and maybe grab that other mic for Erika, that'd be great. Thank you both so much. And I'll say, like, Ron's Instagram is mostly cones that people have sent him over the years, and it's a pretty good scroll just to see where a cone might get lost and how it might get lost. There's been some good cones.
Yeah, send me a cone. I'll post it on Instagram.
I'm mostly going to let other people ask questions, but I thought, I was just thinking about a little bit when Erika started talking about like volcano time, was it suggested cone time to me, and thinking about these two different time scales. And there's something really attractive, Erika, to like your thinking about like the constant, these different speeds of the volcano time and the different ways we interact with it, and also the way, like for me, where like, especially those roads, I think, you think of a road, like once, we know roads degrade, but you think that road is like a permanent thing, and it's not, it's quickly made not impermanent by the volcano, or the volcano's reminder that the earth is not like one thing, but constantly changing. And then I feel like the cone almost does the opposite for me, right? Like the cone is meant to be temporary, like we're doing something here right now, but that cone is both, they get lost, as many of these have, or you steal them, or like they're meant to be temporary, but they're gonna outlive us, even the ones that and I'm just wondering, because you're both making art in different ways, if you could just maybe talk about how those timescales like go into sort of art making for you, because I think like there's a lot of writers in the room and stuff, and they might be interested to know like how this sort of, these observations and the theory becomes like funnels back into like creativity. Yeah. They're not going to make any noise, but yeah. Just,
okay.
Yeah.
Fake microphone. Yeah, I think that's a really great question in terms of framing this in terms of art practice too. Like specifically when I was putting together this presentation, that's kind of one of the things I was thinking about, because I go on these like weird research tangents that like feel really important and really vital to me. And then the work I make, you might not see this at all in it, where like I work mostly in textiles and sculpture and in video, and really the closest place it comes into is video. So thinking about like all of this research in terms of thinking about, I don't know, whatever a given situation is, like how that then distills through abstraction for me. But then there are these points that like click back in. They're like the materials I work with, and then through like the speeds of things I work with. So I work a lot with textiles that operate in I think about it as like a pre-industrialized time where like we're not often like weaving cloth line by line these days. So it's like, how does that then teleport us back to a different temporality? Or how does that take me out of digital time? Or like if I'm working with ceramics or cement casting, like is you're somehow like nudging against geologic time in like creating and reconfiguring a geologic?
Thank you.
So, I mean, in some ways, we all live after Duchamp, and so Duchamp's found objects is obviously really important for me because those of you who aren't familiar with him, he one famous example of his is to take a men's urinal and then turn it sideways and put it into a museum, call it the Fountain.
Right.
You know, and so that recontextualization and recoding through language is an attempt to take something that's familiar out of a place, take it out of place, put it in a new context so we see it differently. And certainly that's what I'm doing with cones. And I think a lot of art is highlighting something that we're just not paying attention to. So it just brightens it. It kind of brightens a particular object, often material object, and then the nodes and connections around that object. And I think that's, for example, what you're doing with the road is like, hey, look at that crack. Hey, that crack's not just a crack. It's connected to all these other nodes. And there's a whole infrastructure there. And there's also scientific infrastructure. And there's a geologic time. So it's taking the thing that we would just kind of pass by and exploring the permutations of it. And so then if you, as I think as fiction writers, a lot of times what we end up doing is just exploding that out. Instead of making it something small, make it something really, really large and go like bigger and deeper into that. And then you find yourself into whole worlds. Yeah.
Has both these projects made you like more attentive to like time scale and time signature sort of generally? It feels like the form of attention of both of these is pretty high. Like you and I have been friends a long time. I see cones everywhere. I'm always sending you pictures of cones. It's like changed the way I move through the world in some ways to have interacted with your art project. And I was wondering if like, is that something that's like present for you? Do you feel like you have access to those time scales when you're like living your life or thinking about other things as opposed to like just when you're talking about it in this way?
I mean, I'm constantly thinking about it. Like, that's what my whole art practice is. And also that's what, like, how I move through the world as a human, like, is paying attention to, like, not rocks in terms of, like, ooh, that's a pretty one, but being like, wonder where that came from. That moved there. That went there. I pay attention to landscape rock. I pay attention to everything. And thinking about...
I would say you should tell them about the landscape rock.
Yeah, I'm like medium obsessed with landscape rock. So if anyone wants to talk to me about landscape rock, I have another project that's tracked pretty much all the landscape rock that populates the valley and where those mine sites came from, and understanding that those kind of came from within 100 miles usually. So thinking about like this rock is here decorating, they're decorating your yards. People change it out because like they're like, I want gold. I moved into this house. I want gold rock now. Yeah. So like is using these sort of like aesthetic whims for one's yard. And engaging this geomaterial that's been brought in from like 100 miles. And it also like, all of a sudden it's like delineating property boundaries, faux water things. Mm-hmm. So it's a really, I don't know, I'm really interested in landscape rock as a way of sort of understanding the built environment and our ideas about it. And also how that, yeah. Talking about rocks if you want.
Yeah, it's good.
Well, I mean, it's like things come from somewhere.
Yeah.
Right. And I think you're kind of doing that at Taliesin West as well, right? You have something there, which is, oh, look at this beautiful house. Everyone's like Frank Lloyd Wright, great. But you're actually looking at the infrastructure. So you want to talk about that as a thing?
I mean, it's the same sort of thing where it's like I'm doing a project that's coming up at Taliesin West, which is Frank Lloyd Wright, famous architect's school, and all the rock that's used to build the facilities there all come from the 500 acres around there. So I'm doing this project that pays attention to like the landscape rock project, saying like all these big rocks that we're seeing like cemented in place here, they came from somewhere and they came from this place. And it's like this land that was like owned by a man in the early 1900s. So it's like all tracing that history, but then also being like, this like geomaterial that's really old also has a history, and paying attention to it and trying to also not romanticize it, and not being like, look at this beautiful landscape, being like, this is a thing that's older than us that we moved to do a thing. What does that mean?
Yeah. So I once had a Buddhist teacher, a Zen master, who she explained to me, like, okay, like if you do drugs, kids don't do drugs, but if you do drugs, sometimes you get different temporal experiences, right? And things open up because the ego drops off, and so things get bigger, and you see the world differently. And she explained that, you know, that's a way to see, but it's often very temporary, right? And so what meditation practice does is it can take something like those experiences, but broaden and widen and deepen them. And so I think one of the things that art practice or this way of seeing does is it becomes this, again, this portal, this opportunity. I don't know if it's a drug or a meditation. That's the only question I have.
Are cones?
But yes. So the cones, you know. Right. So is it a temporary, or is it something that I can abide with and actually deepen from, as you're saying, and so start seeing the geological and other things in this way? I mean, we're in this house, right, which is one of the oldest structures at the university.
Campus, yeah.
Right, yeah, the former president's house. So like, what are the hauntologies, the temporal hauntologies of this, both in terms of having a president lived here, right, which meant there was a university, and before that a school, before it was a state, and before that indigenous populations that were here, etc. And so all of a sudden you fall into these temporal holes that kind of take you elsewhere. Yeah.
Well said. Nice. I think is a cone a drug or a meditation? Sounds like a question for a certain mindset as well. It's good, yeah. Open it up to questions from the audience if you have questions for Ron or Erika or both. After someone asks a question, I'm going to look at my phone to see if there's online questions. I'm not just bored. Okay. Any questions from the crowd? Yeah, Stuart, please.
All right, so I'm a bit ignorant here. What was the cone inception? What was the first cone?
That's a great question.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay, it happened kind of in a sequence where I was at my apartment complex, and I saw this this little asphalt. You know how they'll like pave over something, the asphalt, and it was maybe 6 feet by 6 feet, but it had 8 cones around it, and you're like, that's a little excessive on the cones, mate. You know. So I was like, okay, that's strange. You just kind of notice that, like even a normal human would notice that. And then I
like the distinction.
yes, yeah.
Yourself, even a
normal human. And then I was in the English department here, and there was just a random cone sitting out in the plaza. And you know, this place, you're like, why is this here? It's like such a beautiful open patio. And there's this cone. I'm like, what are you doing, cone? And so then I kind of put those two together. I'm like, there are cones doing things in weird semantic ways. They're signaling in ways that is like are unusual. And after that, yeah, you start just noticing, right? And then, of course, having a phone around, you start documenting everything. Yeah. And then once you get obsessed, people send you things. Yeah. So.
I think one of the other things that's interesting about like the cones that I remember last summer you were reading a history of the color. Like safety orange is also like obviously it was invented.
Yeah. I didn't talk about that. Yeah. So it was like it was invented in the 1820s. Prior to that, people would just have 1920s. Yeah, not 1820s. 1920, they couldn't make that. So it was like 20s, 30s, you know, they started, and then prior to that, it was just like wood stick things that they would paint. And you're like, that's not really helpful. There are a lot of wood stick things hanging around, you know? So it started on the West Coast, and it became official within some of the states in the West. And then some federal traffic guy came out to the West, saw the cones, and was like, we got to bring this back east. And then they joined with a corporation, got patented, joined with a corporation, and it was about the same time, 1950s, when, the kind of IBM corporate man generation where everything gets standardized, that they were standardizing a lot of safety procedures, including the color, safety orange. So it's a particular color, which I love that. And that's, the title of that book was Safety Orange. And at that point, then they designated particular kinds of cones for what we use them today. Yeah.
Other questions?
Which is also an example of like when you think things, things that we take for granted actually have a history.
Yeah, I think that's just a good example of a communication symbol that we all know what means. And in 1930, you wouldn't have known what it means. You would have seen your first orange cone and been like, "What's this?" And I think by the time you're probably 5 or 6, you kind of know that cone is not a thing you're supposed to avoid it, right?
Yeah.
In our society, but it's interesting to think that wouldn't have worked on you at all.
Right. And it goes to Europe. You can go across the globe.
Yeah.
You see a cone. People know. It doesn't matter what language you speak. You speak cone, as Suzette says.
Such a good line, Suzette. In the Fallout TV show that's on Amazon, I don't know if maybe you watched that. There's a scene in the second episode, and it's just in the background of it. But there's all this nuclear waste piled up in a cave, and there's just a bunch of cones thrown on the ground around it. It's just a really good visual gag that would never have noticed without your cone project. But I was like, oh, look at those cones that somebody was just good enough. Right. I guess one of the things I'm thinking about. Oh, sorry. Was there a question? Oh, please, thank you.
So, you said from about 55 minerals to 5,000. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know when, approximately, if there was a time where it sort of went up, or has it just been steadily increasing?
I'm not a geologist. Isn't your background in geology?
No.
Is it something about?
Biology.
Okay. The gist that I know is that organic and geologic mineral evolution has happened alongside each other. So it's with the proliferation of organic and biologic life that also spurred on sort of the ramping up of mineral evolution. So it's again things happening in adjacencies to each other. Things don't happen in there's no isolated events. It just doesn't exist like that. So yeah. But I was I like the idea of thinking about it as this thing that is as things are declining, the minerals are we're doing things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just really interesting.
I didn't know it at all. I felt so dumb. I was having a meeting with a geologist about this paper, and I was so this paper, it's cool anthropogenic minerals. They're evolving and happening. And he's they've always been evolving and happening. And I was sorry.
I do think you could make some sort of poster.
Yeah.
It's number of species, number of rocks. It'd be.
I bet it looks like that hockey stick graph, right?
Yeah.
It's just the industrial revolution starts and the minerals
Yeah.
start going
And
up.
put
And that's
pretty correlated, yeah.
Yeah, there are minerals. I know calcite. When I was talking to this guy about it, he was if we would have had the qualification of anthropogenic minerals, a lot of the minerals that were part of the 5,000 would have been qualified as anthropogenic because I think calcite was first found at a site that was adjacent to human stuffs.
Well, it's also interesting then, because then I feel what would need investigating is the correlation,
Yeah.
if it exists.
Yeah.
Which it seems it does, but.
I agree. Yeah. Please.
And I would, again, not a geologist, as he said, but I assume that the rise in minerals is primarily due to microorganisms. You said that species are on decline, but would microorganisms be on the rise and that be contributing to the rise in minerals?
I have no idea. Do you know? I don't know anything about microbes. I know they're really cool though.
I know that as organisms age, their microbiome tends to become less diverse. So, due to stress, due to aging, due to health issues, the microbiome in a human tends to become significantly less diverse, and that leads to all sorts of health problems down the line.
That's interesting.
I don't know about microbiomes outside of the human body.
Yeah.
I'm organic chemistry, not inorganic.
But thinking about like the microbiome of like a human that declines with age, whereas like, we're born with a low, and so we have to like build up our microbiome. So like, what is that peak in terms of like life? That's something interesting to think about.
The more of those probiotic shakes you're drinking, the more minerals you're making. It's good, yeah. That's really interesting. I think it's another one of those, like, as a science fiction writer, thinking about these things as like things that could be here long in the future, or like if they were found by alien civilizations long if we're gone. Like in the way that we look for life on on Mars or the moon or something, by looking for like the building blocks of like biological life. Like anthropogenic minerals are also a sign of life, right? Intelligent life got to the stage where they had industrial things here. Aliens could show up and like, oh, they got to the steam age. That's pretty cool. What happened to them? But I think those are like some of our sign of like that the world we existed. That would be there even if somehow all of our buildings were gone and all of our art was gone and stuff. We'd still have these things that only arise from industrial practices for someone else to show up and be like, huh, yeah.
They did that.
Yeah. Just cones, all this one cone.
So as a up-and-coming writer, I often think of world building as like interaction between the people, right? And so like you have homes and how lived in is that house. But would you consider like the roads being cracked by volcanic activity and stuff like that, and cones being forgotten for centuries? Like that's another type of world building. Would you say? I guess, is that a type of world building?
Probably.
Yeah.
But like I think about it as conversation. So it's like in world building, in like reframing who we're calling actors and non-actors or characters in a space. So like world build. I guess that's how I'm thinking about in terms of like world building and narrative building.
Yeah.
It's like giving agency to those things.
They were reading in class right now N.K. Jemisin's The Fifth Season, which
Oh,
is a very
nice.
active planet,
Yeah.
right? Tectonics and Father Earth hates you, and it's like it's a very active conversational planet. Yeah.
Right, yeah, there's the agency right there. So it's like, what if the setting wasn't just a setting, but actually an actor,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
One of the things that science fiction critics talk about is that science fiction is a vehicle for creating new metaphors. And like you think about like the metaphor of how like Father Earth works in like the Fifth Season is a way of like feeling the thing that like you're observing with the volcanoes and stuff, right? Like it's a metaphor for what the world already is, which is an active, moving thing that we have to respond to in different ways. Obviously, not necessarily in the way the Fifth Season happens, but it seems like Jemison's given us another metaphor for thinking about the world we live in a certain way, and our relationship to it. Yeah.
And that's why science fiction's so cool.
Yeah.
Like as a non-writer too, like you guys do like the actual like laying out work of the like weird sensing work that I do that then because it's this like weird abstracted thing where it's like, oh, but you guys are providing ways for like general public to digest and start to understand and like move through the world in different ways.
But you're already using Le Guin's metaphors of the theolinguist and stuff to see it as well, right? You're in conversation with that as well and thinking science fictional thoughts in your presentation.
But yeah, so that's an example of like exploding out, right? Like so Fifth Season or the Le Guin's like, I mean, what if you could talk to animals? Okay, well, what about no eggplant? Now, what about rocks? Like just taking it to these different extremes, or like the earth crack stuff that happens within Fifth Season is like, no, it's not just cracks and not just volcanoes, but like let's go bigger. And by going bigger, you're really you're both making it alien, so it's another world, and also calling attention again, like. I'm using the cone, you're defamiliarizing it and bringing it into another kind of space to make it do something else. And I think that's really valuable.
What would you define as alien?
I mean, there are, this is, go back to Freud. I mean, there are parts of myself that are alien to me. So that's one of the problems, right? Is there's radical and unknowable otherness, and as soon as we have an encounter with an alien, any crossover connection then becomes absorbed. There's this saying that I really stayed with me by Jacques Derrida, philosopher, French philosopher. He said, everyone has either a smaller or a bigger narcissism. So like, it's just a question of how big our narcissism is. How much will we allow in? But we're still absorbing it. And as soon as we absorb the alien, then how much of it, this is true of someone else. If you know someone else, you're taking them in to your world and your conscious understanding. But in doing that, how much have you sacrificed of who they actually are, right? And this is the problems of trying to get to know someone or miscommunication is because of that relationship. So there's alien all around us is another way of thinking about it.
Yeah, please. I completely forgot what I was going to proceed my question with, but it was basically you talked about the different, like volcanic time versus like documentaries versus TikTok, like the quick, snappy information. Is there something that you find inherently wrong with the speeding up of information gathering?
No, not at all. I just think it's really fascinating. Oh, because I really like to watch the slow live streams on in the background, and then I also consume a lot of my volcano media on Instagram, and so it's more something I was paying attention to, where it's these different ways of entering the idea of an eruption that is something that's crazy spectacular to start with, and then we're double spectacularifying it by turning it into this 12-second clip that is the most sensational moment of the eruption. So yeah, mainly it's just pay attention to all the different times you can drop in and out of on a screen.
I've watched you give this presentation twice now, and both times when you play this really slow video, I can't see it moving for a minute. It's going, you know what I mean? I'm expecting you to I'm going to play a volcano, and I'm where is it? You know, and it's I feel myself adjust to the actual speed of the thing you're showing me. It's really interesting. That I'm expecting fast, and it's slow.
Another way to think about this is all of information speed. That is, it's a condensation of other things in order for us to know something. So language took a long time to evolve. So, but we read it at a fast speed. And the knowledge that's gathered in, say, a Wikipedia site is something that's happened over a dense amount of time and also took a long time to compile. But yet we absorb it within a certain amount, quicker time. So we're actually in any of this moving within different temporalities. Yeah.
You must feel that as an artist, and I feel that as a writer. You spend 5 years making something, people read it in a weekend. You know, it's you spend all this time reading a thing, people go by on the wall and go, "Huh, art." You know, the time scale of you and them is very different from each other. Although obviously there are people who spend. You spend your whole lifetime studying a book too, and that's a totally different way of taking in that information, right? Absolutely. Maybe we have time for one more question if someone has something. The first question and last question are always the hardest. It's probably best for us.
No online questions.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I think we're great. Thanks so much, guys. This is fantastic. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming, guys. And thanks for hosting this, Matt.
Thank you. Our next World Building event will be in October. It's on the 22nd or 21st. It'll be the Wednesday of Humanities Week, which will be with the writer Erika who wrote a book called We Lived on the Horizon that's really great about bioengineering and AI and class ethics and a bunch of other things. Those of you in my class will be reading it for class, and Erika will be joining us. But you can sign up for that event on the Humanities Institute site. If you are not in the class and would like to come, you're more than welcome. We'd love to have you with us. So yeah, hopefully see you then. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great night, and please take some more cookies with you. And that's that. Appreciate it. Thank you.